The woman first affronted the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced her foot to plunge into the dread and shoeless vacancy.
Good morning. So we're in Book 9, Book of Eternal Night, Canto 2, The Journey in Eternal Night. We're at page 584, near the top, fourth line down. Does that seem right to you? Okay. So Savitri is journeying along with the god of death and Satyavan into the darkness. And she is going to be conversing with the god of death. I thought it interesting to contrast a little bit this journey of Savitri into the darkness with King Aswapati's journey in Book 2. And in his journey, the quality is a bit different. It's much more into the realm of falsehood, into a world of deception and kind of evil influences which are pressing on him. Also, he enters into realms which are peopled by kind of evil beings or beings living in squalor and misery. Savitri enters into something which is something more existential, of a very denial of existence itself, of her own being, a sense of disappearance into emptiness or nothingness. But she does hold this conversation nonetheless with this god of death. And in that, he presents various arguments for the unreality of the world and space and time and the beings who live there, that ultimately they're just a transient phenomenon that's dreamlike without real substance floating on this emptiness, and tries to convince her of that. Now they're entering deeper into this darkness. So we'll see how it's described here. So perhaps Margaret could begin, fourth line from the top on 584.
There was no course, no path, no end or goal. Visionless she moved amid insensible gulfs, or drove through some great black unknowing waste, or whirled in a dumb eddy of meeting winds, assembled by the taken hands of chance. There was none with her in the dreadful vast. She saw no more the vague, tremendous God. Her eyes had lost their luminous Satyavan. Yet not for his, her spirit failed, but held more deeply than the bounded senses can, which grasp externally and find too loath its object loved. So when on earth they lived, she had felt him straying through the glades. The glades is seen in her, its clefts her being vistas, opening their secrets to his search and joy, because to jealous sweetness in her heart, whatever happy space his cherished feet preferred, must be at once her soul embracing his body, fashioning dumbly to his tread.
Thank you. Let's pause there. We see in these opening lines the nature of this emptiness that she's descending into. There was no course, no path, no end or goal. Visionless, she moved amid insensible gulfs. It's just moving in an empty blackness. And then it says, or she whirled in a dumb eddy of meeting winds, as if she's just entering into a kind of a chaos of movement. And she felt completely alone. She could no longer see Satyavan or the god of death. It's just completely dark. But she holds on. She keeps her spirit, her sense of self. And then it compares her feeling to when she lived with Satyavan and he would enter into the forest to do his work. She would be at home, but still her being somehow would go with him. Her spirit would travel with him into the forest and enclose him in herself. She would sense his presence where he was going. So in a sense, that experience in life she has now. She's still, in a sense, holding onto his presence even though she can no longer see him. Something that she doesn't want to lose, that sweetness of his love, of his presence. She doesn't want to let go of that. So she keeps it like jealously. She holds it in herself. She holds him so he doesn't go too far away, that she doesn't miss him. So I think we can continue. Nitya.
But now a silent gulf between them came, and to abysmal loneliness she fell, even from herself cast out, from love remote. Long hours, since long it seems, when sluggish time is measured by the throbs of the soul's pain. In an unreal darkness, empty and drear, she travelled, treading on the corpse of life, lost in a blindness of extinguished souls. Solitary in the anguish of the void, she lived in spite of death, she conquered still. In vain her puissant being was oppressed. Her heavy, long monotony of pain, tardily of its fierce self-torture tired. At first, a faint, inextinguishable gleam, pale but immortal, flickered in the gloom, as if a memory came to spirits dead, a memory that wished to live again, dissolved from mind in nature's natal sleep. It wandered like a lost ray of the moon, revealing to the night her soul of dread. Serpentine in the gleam, the darkness lolled, its black hoods jeweled with the mystic glow. Its dull, sleek folds shrank back and coiled and slid, as though they felt all light a cruel pain, and suffered from the pale approach of hope.
Thank you. Now she's pressing deeper into the darkness, and whereas before she could keep her sense of self and her sense of Satyavan's presence, now she begins to lose even that. A silent gulf between them came. So now she's feeling separated from Satyavan and even from her own self and from the sense of love that she has for Satyavan. And the time seems to stretch out as she feels this pain associated with this emptiness and loneliness in which she's descended. And then there's this kind of more terrible image of the darkness, empty and drear. She traveled, treading on the corpse of life, lost in a blindness of extinguished souls. Brings back that atmosphere of death and all these souls that perhaps had gone there and lost themselves in that darkness. But Savitri is not overcome by all of this. She feels the anguish of the void, but still she lived. Still she conquered. And then, in her heavy, long monotony of pain, tardily of its fierce self-torture tired. So as she experiences this pain, this terrible torture, as time passes, somehow it eased, or she became used to it. It no longer felt as intense. And then it speaks of this light that she still carries, a faint, inextinguishable gleam, pale but immortal, flickered in the gloom, as if a memory came to spirits dead, a memory that wished to live again, dissolved from mind in nature's natal sleep. So something of the light of her soul is still flickering, just very faintly in that darkness. It wandered like a lost ray of the moon, revealing to the night her soul of dread. And then he describes the darkness, serpentine in the gleam, the darkness lulled. So it's moving snake-like. So this is from the light of her soul. It's, although dim and flickering, it's lighting up the darkness around. So the darkness lulled, so it just very lazily kind of sitting there, motionless. Its black hoods jeweled with the mystic glow. So that darkness is lit up like, I suppose, the hood of a cobra. So it was moving, seemed to be moving, sliding through the darkness. So it's lit up slightly, this darkness, and it looks like this cobra with maybe these golden flecks of color lit up by the glow of her soul. Its dull, sleek folds shrank back and coiled and slid, as though they felt all light a cruel pain and suffered from the pale approach of hope. Okay, any questions? It says what?
What I'm trying to discuss is like her soul's pain. So does the soul feel the pain? That's my question. Like the sentence, it measured the throbs of soul's pain, line 93. I'm just wondering whether soul suffers or our vital suffers pain or theoretical question. Poetry. Huh? It's poetry. Yes. Okay. But actually it doesn't. A real soul.
Yeah, but I think maybe
He's feeling that way.
maybe it can, the psychic being.
The psychic being, yes.
It feels something of the suffering of the falsehood in which it lives. I think Sri Aurobindo says somewhere that it can suffer. Hmm?
In human beings, in the material world, we can say very explicitly all these words, but as in poetry, even matter's aspiration and everything which aspires the spirit that is hidden in the inconscient, in matter, in subconscious, in everything, the aspiration takes this form of pain, the soul which is identified in this darkness.
I'm not sure. The aspiration is painful. That's what she's saying. So.
Yeah, I think she's saying more or less this aspiration, which is there in everything, is oppressed.
Yeah, this is fine.
And that oppression can be felt as painful.
But normally, aspiration, you feel hopeful, you feel for better.
Yeah, but if it's
reach your aspiration.
But that's not aspiration's pain. It's your vital pain or your mind's pain that you are not reaching your aspirations, not able to achieve what you aspire for.
What he wants to express is that there is something which goes beyond physical pain. And then you can say the heart's pain or the soul's pain or these kind of things. It is okay.
Discussing her, this thing, sentence saying leads to aspiration, and that is painful. The aspiration is painful. That I want to pick up now.
When it's suppressed, as he says, in inconscient, when we are identified in unconsciousness and the soul is not free, like in human beings, we can say all this explicitly psychic being. But when we ourselves descend into states which are much deeper, even in ordinary life or even in yoga, and you feel cut off from the light, we experience the suffocation which is pain. And this is expressed, as Larry said, and Mother has said, in other creatures, in other non-dumb creatures, and even in matter, which takes different forms. I was just saying, it's like a simile or a metaphor or poetic, an expression, that's all.
Yeah, that soul is there, aspiring, in a sense, in all life, right? But yet, it's encumbered by its instruments in which it lives, by these sheaths of the physical and the vital and the mind, and they're very limited. And the soul is seeking to express itself, its light and its joy and all of that, as well as it can, through that covering. But that can be a painful process at times, especially when it's thwarted, contradicted by that outer form through which it's striving to express. So that's where I think that suffering comes.
In fact, Mother herself has described her own descent into inconscient, and she describes her experience, the Divine Mother, our Mother, and how suffocating and stifling and painful it is. She's the Divine Mother, and she's identified. But when she descends, she has given a message after she comes up, is that she still found light there. It's the same. I mean, I'm not speaking of human beings. Even for the divine avatars, when they descend there, they shared experience. The words she used was exactly these words of dark and stifling and painful.
Yeah, and the avatar takes on all of that suffering of humanity and experiences that also, Sri Aurobindo says, if he never experiences that suffering, how could he cure that for humanity? He also has to know it and experience it. And he takes it perhaps even more fully than we do. But I think now we can continue.
Night felt assailed her heavy sombre rain. The splendor of some bright eternity threatened with this faint beam of wandering truth her empire of the everlasting naught. Implacable in her intolerant strength, unconfident that she alone was true, she strove to stifle the frail dangerous ray. Aware of an all-negating immensity, she reared her giant head of nothingness, her mouth of darkness swallowing all that is. She saw in herself the tenebrous absolute. But still the light prevailed, and still it grew, and Savitri to her lost self awoke. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death. Her heartbeats triumphed in the grasp of pain. Her soul persisted claiming for its joy, the soul of the beloved now seen no more. Before, in the stillness of the world, once more she heard the treading of a god, and out of the dumb darkness Satyavan, her husband, grew into a luminous shade.
Thank you. So first, Sri Aurobindo describes how night felt, and he refers to the night as her, using this feminine pronoun. So night felt assailed, her heavy, somber reign, her rulership She felt threatened by Savitri and her light. The splendor of some bright eternity threatened with this faint beam of wandering truth her empire of the everlasting naught. Yes, yeah, so that's Savitri's faint beam of light, of wandering truth in this darkness. Before he described it as, at first, a faint, inextinguishable gleam, pale but immortal, flickered in the gloom. So that was how it was described. So here he describes it threatening with this faint beam of wandering truth. Night's empire of the everlasting naught. And then, implacable in her intolerant strength, he's still referring to the night, and confident that she alone was true. She strove to stifle the frail, dangerous ray. It's dangerous to her, darkness. Night, yeah. And then, aware of an all-negating immensity, she feels this immensity of nothingness. She reared her giant head of nothingness. It's interesting that it's a conscious nothingness. This darkness and emptiness, it's still somehow a conscious being or existence. Her mouth of darkness swallowing all that is. She saw in herself the tenebrous absolute. She felt herself as the absolute, this absolute darkness, nothingness. It is out of this that all emerges, and into this it all again departs. And then it shifts and it looks from the point of view of Savitri, but still the light prevailed and still it grew, and Savitri to her lost self awoke. Whereas she had momentarily lost consciousness of her own being, she comes again into realizing her own identity. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death. Her heartbeats triumphed in the grasp of pain. Her soul persisted, claiming for its joy the soul of the beloved now seen no more. So she's coming back into her own self, again feeling her love for Satyavan, that she's missing him, but she still cannot see him. But then, before her, in the stillness of the world, once more she heard the treading of a god, and out of the dumb darkness, Satyavan, her husband, grew into a luminous shade. So again, she's able to perceive him in that darkness, appearing as if a shadow moving in the darkness. Yeah. hmm Yeah, it's like that flickering pale light in the gloom. So it's sometimes when it's flickering, it goes out and she cannot even sense her own self anymore. But then it flickers back and she can again sense her own being. Mm. 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 Okay. Okay. Say again, I didn't. It wandered like a lost ray of the moon. Yeah, it's just describing her light in that darkness. Okay, let's continue. Helmut? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you go ahead.
Then a sound pealed through the dead monstrous ram, vast like the surge in a tired swimmer's ears, clamoring a fatal iron-hearted roar. That missioned to the night is lethal call. This is my silent, dark immensity. This is the home of everlasting night. This is the secrecy of nothingness, entombing the vanity of life's desires. Hast thou beheld thy source, O transient heart, and known from what the dream thou art was made? In this stark sincerity of nude emptiness, hopest thou still always to last and love? The woman answered not. Her spirit refused. The voice of night that knew and death that thought. In her beginningless infinity, gazed. She saw the undying fountains of her life. She knew herself eternal without birth.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So death speaks to her, and as the sound comes, Sri Aurobindo describes it like the surge of a wave or water in a swimmer's ears when it engulfs him or her. Death missioned to the night his lethal call. It's interesting that, so here he uses this death and night both in a sentence, and later he will do that again. The distinction is interesting. I'm not completely sure I understand, but it seems as if perhaps death is something kind of emerging out of this night, out of the, let's say, this emptiness, this void of the night. Death is something that emerges from that, and also later he'll speak of the voice. Well, let's see, the voice of night, and death, that thought. Huh? Mm. Uh-huh. Mhm. So, death is speaking through night, is what you're suggesting. It may be. And then, so he's telling Savitri, this is my silent, dark immensity. This is the home of everlasting night. This is the secrecy of nothingness, entombing the vanity of life's desires. So this is where all life's desires end up, entombed, buried in this emptiness, nothingness. And then he says, hast thou beheld thy source, O transient heart? So this is your source of your being, and you're just a transient heart emerging from this who will end up back into this. And known from what the dream thou art was made, as if your being, our being, is just made out of this emptiness, this void. It's just more or less an illusion. In this stark sincerity of nude emptiness, hopest thou still always to last and love? Now that she is in that emptiness, feels it close around her, he asks, do you still hope to live and love? But she answers not, this voice of night. In her beginningless infinity, through her soul's reaches, unconfined, she gazed. She saw the undying fountains of her life. She knew herself eternal, without birth. So she's able to look within herself and see and feel her own infinity. So she's not persuaded, not confused by death's speech. Yeah.
No, I think it's the other way. The voice of might, her speech refuses the voice of might that knew. The voice of might knew, but she and that is thought. That thought, and she knew. So what he's saying on that is kind of
But it does. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, to me also it's a bit of a mystery. It seems pretty clear that it's night that knew, not Savitri. I mean, when you use that immediately after the subject, it suggests pretty clearly to me that it's the voice of night that knew. But why night knows and death only thinks, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Refuse the voice of night that knew. Yeah, well, okay.
otherwise also, I think thoughts are not so well comprehensive compared to what we really know from our experience.
Okay. Okay. You can have that view. But in any case, Savitri is unconvinced. She feels, she knows her own infinity, her own truth of being. So this night's argument that she only originates from this emptiness, from this void, and that she's just transient, she knows it's not true. So we'll continue.
But still opposing her with endless night, death, the dire god, inflicted on her eyes the immortal calm of his tremendous gaze. Although thou hast survived the unborn void, which never shall forgive, while time endures, the primal violence that fashioned thought, forcing the immobile vast to suffer and live. This sorrowful victory only hast thou won, to live for a little without such a one. What shall the ancient goddess give to thee, who helps the heartbeats? Only she prolongs the nothing dreamt existent and delays with the labor of her living thy eternal sleep. A fragile miracle of thinking clay, armed with illusions, walks the child of time. To fill the void around, he feels and dreads the void he came from and to which he goes. He magnifies himself and names it God. He calls the heavens to help his suffering hopes. He sees above him with a longing heart bare spaces more unconscious than himself, that have not even his privilege of mind, and empty of all but their unreal blue, and peoples them with bright and merciful powers.
Thank you. There's still this little play between death and night here. And so death is still opposing her with endless night, because he says death, the dire god, inflicted on her eyes the immortal calm of his tremendous gaze. His immortal calm, death's calm. He's this god of death. He's a cosmic being. He's also apparently immortal. But anyway, he has the calm of immortality. And he tells her, you have survived this unborn void. And then there's this interesting sentence here, which never shall forgive, while time endures, the primal violence that fashioned thought. Now, see, I think this is again that kind of play. I mean, when he says thought here, it makes us kind of go back to death, that thought. And this unborn void has undergone some primal violence, which fashioned thought, which made thought arise and forced the immobile vast to suffer and live. So from out of that nothingness, out of that void, I would say of the night, something stirred, something moved, and it began to think and suffer and live, though transiently. So that's how I kind of look at that play again of thought or of night and death. This sorrowful victory only hast thou won, to live for a little without Satyavan. You have persisted in my realm of the void, but you're not getting Satyavan back, and you may live for a while, but you'll still join us later. And then He offers her some boons. What shall the ancient goddess give to thee, who helps thy heartbeats? Oh no, he doesn't yet offer the boons. He's only just kind of mocking her and saying, okay, you can live for a little while, only we're allowing you to prolong the nothing dreamed existence, what you are, and delay with the labor of living thy eternal sleep. He's more or less just still mocking her and saying, we're allowing you to live a little bit longer, but you're still coming into this darkness and emptiness at last. And then he speaks of mankind in general. And here we get a little bit of a sense of the point of view of atheism and of science, perhaps. To fill the void around, he feels and dreads. We dread that void that we sense. The void he came from and to which he goes. He magnifies his self and names it God. God is just more or less a product of our mind or imagination, which we base on our own sense of self. We imagine God to be kind of a large human being. And then we call the heavens to help us in our suffering. And we sense with our longing heart. So we sense something in these bare spaces of the sky or of the void around, which is more unconscious even than us. We sense, we people them with bright and merciful powers. We imagine all these gods and goddesses and merciful powers above us, helping us. But actually it's just the unreal blue of the sky. Shall we continue? Margaret? Third line, yeah.
For the sea roars around him, and earthquakes beneath his steps, and fire is at his doors, and death prowls baying through the woods of life. Moved by the presences with which he yearns, he offers in implacable shrines his soul, and clothes all with the beauty of his dreams. The gods who watch the earth with sleepless eyes and guide its giant stumblings through the void, have given to man the burden of his mind. In his unwilling heart they have lit their fires, and sown in it incurable unrest. His mind is a hunter upon tracks unknown, amusing time with vain discovery. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate, and turns to song his laughter and his tears. His mortality waxing with the immortal streams, troubling his transience with the infinite's breath, they gave him hungers which no food can fill. He is a cattle of the shepherd gods. His body, the tesa with which he is tied, they cast for further grief and hope and joy. This, this pasture ground they have fenced with ignorance.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So Death is continuing his argument of how mankind fills the void with his imagined gods, which he thinks and hopes will help him in his suffering. So now he describes that predicament in which mankind exists. For the sea roars around him, and earth quakes beneath his steps, and fire is at his doors, and death prowls, baying through the woods of life. This baying is the sound of dogs or hounds chasing after their prey in the woods. They're barking, loud, extended barking, howling. So we feel like that, going through life, sensing this death that is stalking us and could come at any time. So that's why we turn to these gods, these imagined deities that might offer us some solace and help. So moved by the presences with which he yearns, he offers in implacable shrines his soul and clothes all with the beauty of his dreams. So we offer in these little shrines and temples our soul to these divine presences which we imagine. To the gods who watch the earth with sleepless eyes and guide its giant stumblings through the void, have given to man the burden of his mind. In his unwilling heart they have lit their fires and sown in it incurable unrest. Yeah. So he's a little inconsistent, I think, in his arguments. Perhaps they're still the imagined gods. So he speaks of those hopes that we carry in our heart and the thoughts that we have about existence. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate, and then turns to song his laughter and his tears. So we write great poems about these things, about life and how we'll conquer death. His mortality vexing with the immortal's dreams, troubling his transience with the infinite's breath. They gave him hungers which no food can fill. Actually suggesting we just make our own misery worse with these imaginations of God and immortality and these things. They give us hungers which no food can fill. He is the cattle of the shepherd gods, his body the tether by which he is tied. They cast for fodder, for food, grief, and hope and joy. His pasture ground they have fenced with ignorance. So he's speaking as if these gods are tossing us these little experiences of grief and hope and joy just to kind of keep us, but we're still tied, fenced in by our own ignorance. We don't go too far with all of that. Okay, I think we're going to stop there for today.
Once more she heard the treading of a god, and out of the dumb darkness Satyavan, her husband, grew into a luminous shape. This mission to the night, his little call. This is my silent, dark immensity, entombing the vanity of life's desire. Hast thou beheld thy source, O transient heart, and known from what the dream thou art was made?
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.